section to really lay out criteria under which the board would say, this is a situation when the inclusionary ordinance does not apply. Development should be allowed to go forward under incentives. There should be continue to offer incentives for including inclusionary or affordable housing, but not mandated numbers of units. So there would be, it really would serve this county well to tailor this ordinance to its local needs, to its local conditions, to have this laid out under the conditions in which this ordinance can be waived and set aside. Otherwise, I think this is would be a rather blunt instrument and may stifle development here in the county. That concludes my comments. If you have any questions of me, I'm happy to respond to those. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak to the inclusionary housing ordinance as proposed? Seeing no one step forward, discussion back to the board. Supervisor Pinches.
Mr. Nichols brought up a real important point. You know, we're into a new, everybody understands we're into a new era as far as housing, financing, credit, and all that. But, you know, the fact of the matter is people that have good incomes and good credit can't even qualify or get a home loan. So where's the provision there to where if they need to sell this house to meet their requirements, say like the 11th house or something, you know, you're going to end up, as he stated, you may have to give that house to the person to meet the requirements, because they might, somebody with a, you know, even with a good income probably can't apply and get a $200,000 home loan nowadays, because the banks have just, for a large part, just quit making home loans. So that, you know, there's no provision for that, I guess, other than the last part of that gentleman was just talking about. But that's a real important fact to remember. You know, where some of these things that government does, it's assumed we do more of the same of what's been happening in the past. But we're entering a new era here, in not only for government but for how the private sector works. And you know, it's government taxes and everything's just been on the rise. Now all of a sudden it's on decrease, and I'm not so sure we know how to deal with it. But you know, if you want to talk about really creating incentives, let's start lowering or reducing some of the building and impact fees that we already have on the books, and lowering that cost of going out there and pouring a foundation and starting. You know, we need to have that discussion. You know, we've made it all these fees, building fees, based on, oh, everybody's making more money, so let's just add more fees. Well, let's go in the other way. So maybe let's think about either decreasing the fees or eliminating for a period of time to create some. To me, that's the real incentive to get somebody started to build a house, is waiver a fee or something. Do what we can. You know, let's do our own stimulus package here in Mendocino County.
Thanks, Supervisor. Discussion back to the board. What's the action of the board? We've offered some suggested changes. Public has voiced a concern about several clarifications or changes. What's the board's direction? The recommended action is receive presentation, review final draft, give direction to staff, and return with inclusionary housing ordinance for introduction and waiving at a future time. Who's first? Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think with the comments that we heard from staff, and that, you know, this has taken a lot of time, and I think it's just a position that we need to sort of move forward on. It's not a final document. It's subject to change at any point. You know, I think we just, as Supervisor Colfax said, we spent a lot of time on this. It's just, I think we need to get something and go forward. I don't think this document makes anyone really happy. I don't think anyone is really thrilled with the result for a variety of reasons and differences of opinion. But I think we need to, you know, we need to get something that's there, and we need to comply with state law, and we need to, you know, we just need to get something going. And there are certainly changes I would like to see, but I think we just need to get it going forward. And say the process is concluded, it's as good as it can be for now. This represents a compromise clearly from a number of positions, and let's just go forward.
Supervisor Pinches?
Well, when this come before us, when I got this agenda package the other day, I was really confused because I was under the impression that we give the staff direction to come back with a strictly voluntary inclusionary ordinance, and which didn't. That was my interpretation, that it wasn't going to have a fee schedule. So I'm not so sure. I'm sure that was the direction of the majority of the board when we talked about this last time, to come back with a voluntary inclusionary housing ordinance. And this is far from voluntary.
Yeah.
But am I wrong? Wasn't that the majority of the board that gave direction?
I don't recall that direction, but in our review of it, yes, you can have voluntary inclusionary housing ordinance. However, the language of our own housing element requires that our inclusionary housing ordinance, in our opinion, to be mandatory. So that's why we're saying that it has to be mandatory, because our own language of our housing element has a mandatory component in it.
And yeah,